I am now going to pass you on without further ado to our second speaker. George is very well respected within the maritime community. He has built a huge global business. I'm not going to steal his thunder. George, welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the organisers for bringing me along to this venue. It's a fairly new way of looking at things from me. In fact, probably that's one reason why I'm probably one of the few people from the shipping community who's actually embarked on the task to look at this whole aspect of human rights from a different perspective. David, I'd like to thank you for your kind remarks. About my business. It's not huge. It's basically just a family-run business, but it's a business which is based on one basic code of ethics. We care. And I think those two words probably embrace the whole situation of how we can handle in future all the issues which we're confronting and we read about in the newspapers. I've had the personal experience of not just reading about them, but I've actually lived them. And it's not an easy task to attain. The word synergy is a Greek word, synergia. And nothing can be achieved without a combined effort from all. And that means from all on all levels. You don't need to only have the heads of state or ministers or people who instruct or more or less create laws and regulations. The whole situation of complying or achieving something has to work out and start by a mechanism which starts from your own soul. The topic is, as I say, it's new for me, and basically there are certain amounts of the area which actually I've covered in my presentation, which have already been covered by David. So I'll try to keep it, more or less concise and highlight the issues which I find mostly important. Now, the topic being how human rights impact business and reputation. Well, in fact, I'm going to pull this title apart, and then you'll find at the end of my presentation the reason why I've pulled it apart. Now, basically, the definition of human rights, if you take what I call a dictionary interpretation, is the freedom to lead a dignified life, to free from fear or want, and free to express independent beliefs. But are we just content with the definition which we find in a dictionary? That won't get anywhere. It hasn't got us anywhere historically. So therefore, basically, the textbook definition of human rights is not going to be adequate to cover anything near the kind of problems which we have. In the shipping world, it's an international business, extends over the global market, and the human rights and maintaining a code of ethics is most vital. I've got the bad habit of using that phrase rather, code of ethics, all the time in my career. I've been around in business for the last half a century, and because I've qualified in law, we always talk about clausing and regulations, and clause 1, subsection 2, and subparagraph 5, and B, section 2 again. But on the other hand, if you maintain a code of ethics, ladies and gentlemen, it probably covers all those issues in a much more effective and realistic, proper way. Now, businesses which include the shipping firms recognize that managing risk and securing their license to operate depend on the being aware of their own human rights impacts, recognize public and political expectations in corporate behavior, nationally and internationally. Well, a company which has operations in regions where human rights abuses are widespread may find that its conduct is subject to scrutiny by a variety of number of factors: laws, rules and regulations, government agencies, NBOs, SRIs, and its own employees and customers. But here we're going on to talk about the situation about the same old approach by looking at what I call textbook and instruction manuals approaches. I personally don't, even though I respect it, I don't have much time for looking at it from that point of view, because I keep on saying, and I'll probably be repetitive in what I'm saying, it comes within the human nature. It's to be able to care ourselves. It's to be able to comply with our own conscience. That's basically the most imperative prerequisite to look at any situation with regard to what we see in the world, and this horrific film which we saw earlier and which we read about, and sometimes we forget about the fact that these things happen all the time, all over the world. In the shipping sector, in my personal experience, we've found on a hands-on situation these categories of issues which come within the aspect of human rights. The migrant crisis, criminalization of seafarers, piracy, and last not least, ship demolition in South Asia. With the migrant crisis, I happened to be present in Malta when we were giving some presentation about the environmental issues, and the previous evening, even though we had the presence of the shipping minister, in fact the Prime Minister of Malta, I phoned up the organizer and said, Yanni, I've got to change my topic, because that same evening, or rather the previous day, there was a boat with migrants, 250 women and children locked in the underhold of the craft, and this sunk, ladies and gentlemen, within 5.5 miles off the island of Malta. That situation was what was the alarm, the real alarm. To find ourselves in a venue, in a country which is a highly well-known, high-profile maritime nation, and have an incident like that, with that gravity, to happen within 6 miles off the actual coast. I mean, you could have got into a Zodiac, an ordinary inflatable, and the distance was close enough to actually approach that place by an ordinary Zodiac. And this situation, which we're talking about, 250 women and children locked, and of course subsequently died from suffocation and drowning when the craft sunk. And this, unfortunately, is a continuous situation. With criminalization of seafarers, years ago, another personal incident, we had a ship which was sustained damage off Pakistan, a ship called the Tasman Spirit. If you want, you can Google it as well and find all the ins and outs about it. It was an ordinary ship which went aground, a massive oil spill. We were involved in the salvage operation. To cut a long story short, the Pakistani law provided for the fact that when they wanted to go against the insurance company, they actually can go against the assets and personnel of the salvors. So we ended up by having all our equipment confiscated, and what was worse, we had our own salvage inspectors who were actually put under house arrest for close to 7 or 8 months. The solutions which we had to look at with a view of freeing these our people, together with the crew members of the ship, was not just the idea of applying to the governments or applying to the Pakistani ministers or going to the embassy in London or in Greece. No, ladies and gentlemen, I actually went to the point of getting a hold of an American lawyer who had connections with Mossad, the Israeli commando unit, and I was about to go and send a craft in, like we see in the James Bond films, of getting in to get these guys out, because the guy who's working with us was on the verge of suicide. He had 2 young children which were newly born, and at the end of the day, the only way where we actually twisted the arm of the authorities was the one I offered personally to go to Pakistan and replace the employee of ours who was under house arrest. I was stopped at the airport by the ambassador, the Greek ambassador, to be told I have to return back because when I go there, they'll hold him and me, so we won't get anywhere. Now, these are situations which I may be going on a bit, but these situations which I perhaps want to go into detail because we live this. We live this every day of the week. Piracy, again, it's another can of worms. You get the piracy of basically off the Djibouti area, which more or less is a matter of money. You pay the fees, you get the helicopter run in, do another exchange of money. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to West Africa, they shoot before they talk. So you've got another scenario which is a massive problem, which we don't know in what shape or form we can actually address it constructively. Corporate social responsibility. I don't like this term. I don't like it at all. Because basically I find that there's a degree of hypocrisy. It's more or less a whole profile, the whole issue around corporate social responsibility. Maybe I'm being biased, or maybe I'm being just too harsh. But it reminds me of a company, because we've seen too many of these situations in the past, and you've all got your own personal experience as well, of to be seen to be caring, to be seen to be doing something. Put it in your textbook, give them the manuals, give them the reminders to make sure they comply with the manuals. You don't have to care about what the results are. All you care about is being a high-profile company, ensure that you're not going to be sued or intimidated or get any form of aggression from the market. For a company of high profile where your share price may take a dive because you have been seen to perhaps not complying with social responsibility aspects. So basically, as I say, I don't like this term. I don't want to be offensive towards the people who join it, who endorse it. That's not my cup of tea. Now here we are, historical. December 18th, 1865, the abolition of slavery. Was there really abolition of slavery? I don't think so. I think basically that was again the textbook situation which happened as a landmark in history. But if you think about it, and all you people here, you must be highly educated people, you'll probably find that slavery went on for years ahead. In fact, this government in England was actually going through slavery aspects well over, I think, about 50 or 70 years thereafter. And unfortunately, in some parts of the world, we still find aspects of slavery. So it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, ladies and gentlemen. Maintain a code of ethics. Look around. Care. Because when you care, you will find people to be inspired and will join your efforts in actually trying to fight this issue, which is a massive human issue, which we're living today. Now, the approach does not have its roots in textbooks or instruction manuals, as I mentioned. It comes to what we can do in our society, what we can do in our life. It has to be based on our own upbringing, our own educational standards, our own cultural background, and last not least, our own religion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am Greek Orthodox. I believe in God. I am religious. And I find that I'm just free to say, and I'm very proud to say, that our religious approach sometimes has a tremendous impact in our ability to share the problems which we're faced with. Now, as I mentioned earlier, respecting human rights is not just the ticking of the box exercise. We have to avoid negative implications or to appear to be doing so the right thing, so it's enhancing a company branding. That's not the issue. Only when reversing the roles and examining the impact of the ship owner on human rights rather than human rights' impact on our business can we truly contribute positively to the shaping of our societies and the future of our countries for generations to come. Leading ourselves and our organizations by living our own values, living with ethos, honesty, responsibility, vision, and passion. Now, basically, how the ship owner's business and reputation can impact on human rights, again, let's go the other way around. Rather than how human rights have the impact on ship owner's business reputation. It goes both ways. On that particular note, food for thought for all of you, and thanks for hearing me.